gardens and pastures have been covered in snow, Vermont foresters and loggers have been working the woods. And when the ground is frozen, Vermont's forest economy is in full bloom. And today we're talking about a Vermont initiative that is growing by leaps and bounds. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. With $18.8 million invested in 555 farms, food, and forestry projects, and an additional $30.9 million leveraged in matching funds, the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative is a state program that has played an important role in the growth of Vermont's rural economy. Joining me to talk about this program are Elizabeth Sipple and Claire Salerno from the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, we're happy to have you. And Elizabeth, I'll start by asking, how long has this program been running?
So the program was created in 2012 by Vermont legislators and Governor Shumlin. And it was the Working Lands Enterprise Fund was created to strengthen Vermont's rural economies, create jobs, sustain the environment, keep Vermont beautiful, and keep our rural communities vibrant. In 2012, in the face of a dwindling working landscape, legislators really had the foresight to understand why a program such as the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative was needed to support and sustain Vermont's working lands.
All right, and tell me about the board and how does that help?
So I think there's a few unique design aspects to the program, and the board is one of them. So at the beginning of the program in 2012, the Working Lands Enterprise Board was tasked with administering the program. It's a 20-member board with members working across the forestry and agriculture supply chains. Each seat is tagged with a specific expertise that we're looking to have represented within the board. So for example, there's a dairy seat, a maple seat, a marketing seat, there's a value-added processing seat, there's a licensed forester seat, there's a logger seat, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a very diverse range of expertise captured within the board. There are also staff members from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Forest Parks and Recreation, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development that sit on the board. And lastly, we have 3 ex officio seats on the board, which are the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and the Vermont Economic Development Authority. And their role is very much because they have, eyes and ears on the ground every day. They're working with businesses and institutions, and they play a critical role of consistently feeding back to the board what they're hearing and seeing, and identifying critical areas of need.
Quite a range of expertise.
It is a range of expertise, and I think another unique aspect of the program that taps into an even larger pool of expertise is our participatory review process of applications. And I do think this is quite a unique process that we commit to, where even in the face of an ever-increasing number of applications, we commit to reviewing each and every application thoroughly. It is read by 3 individual reviewers who are representing the sector that application comes from. So reviewers with dairy expertise will review dairy applications. And I think, so each and every application is read 3 times and reviewed by sector experts, and then those experts convene in a conversation where each and every application is then discussed. And I think that commitment to thoroughness is both representative of our respect for the time and effort that applicants have put into submitting an application, but also the board's commitment and our commitment to making sure that the limited funds are used to their best and highest purpose.
Sure. Now, Claire, why don't you talk about some of the grant programs and the projects that you work with?
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about our business grants, which are for most types of land-based businesses in Vermont. So farm businesses, forestry businesses, as well as food businesses that are using primarily Vermont products, along with like a distribution type business as well. And we work with all size businesses, from one employee to larger businesses for Vermont. The grants that we provide directly to businesses can be a range of sizes, anywhere from $5,000 to $250,000. Typically, most of our grants are in the $10,000 to $50,000 range. And we also work with businesses at all different stages. It's not just very established businesses, it's new businesses as well. And we funded businesses in every part of Vermont, so every county has and received funds.
So what's the grant making process for farmers and forestry businesses? Yeah,
so we follow the state fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. And depending on the year and the amount of funds we have different funding opportunities, applications open, and usually those are open in the fall for our businesses. And they apply and they're reviewed throughout the fall and into the winter. And then typically businesses have about either 1 to 2 years to complete their projects. And Elizabeth talked a little bit already about the pretty robust review process, since we know that these are limited state dollars and that people put in a lot of work. Farmers are very busy. We know that it's a lot to apply for these grants. So we want to make sure they're reviewed well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elizabeth, do you mind speaking to kind of the impact this has on Vermont's businesses and its working landscape?
Yeah, I think we see a whole diversity of impacts coming from the investments. And sometimes there are multiple impacts within one, coming from one grant-funded project. But examples of impacts are jobs created. And then within this labor context, there are also very important impacts around labor efficiencies, worker and owner well-being, workforce development, increased acreage and production is a very important impact for measuring program success, but as is improved land management and climate adaptation. So businesses, strengthening their ability to adapt in the face of a changing climate.
Sure. Do you have a business or like a project that comes to mind when you think of that climate adaptation?
Yeah, I do want to mention that there are 2 other very important impacts that have been important since the beginning of the program, which is just increased productivity and output. And those are core impacts that we see. So businesses are investing in projects that are allowing them to access new markets or produce more of the product in a more efficient way. I think a great example of a recent investment in climate adaptation would be a grant that went to Sweetland Farm based in Norwich, Vermont. And they have a very forward-thinking plan to phase out the use of fossil fuels on their farm. And this investment is helping them to move in that direction, but it is helping them to phase out the use of fossil fuels in heating their greenhouses and running their storage facilities, and moving towards the use of local biomass and solar to provide winter growing, shoulder season growing, and storage capacities. Again, with the ultimate objective of phasing out fossil fuels.
Sure. And you had a similar initiative with Goodridge Lumber, is that right?
Goodridge Lumber is another good example of a project that is having significant impact on, I would say also mitigation, because they were able, with their grant funds, they were able to switch from using a diesel-powered generator and move into 3-phase. They were able to connect to 3-phase electric power. So they no longer are using a diesel generator, so they've completely eliminated their emissions.
Sure. And Claire, do you think this fills a gap that maybe other things leave?
Yeah, so a lot of these projects that Elizabeth mentioned and many other examples, some of them are riskier projects. They're expensive, especially things that are around climate change, sort of using the forefront of new technologies. A lot of our projects can serve businesses that wouldn't qualify for a traditional loan or are using a traditional loan to match the grant project, but we're able to invest in these projects that maybe have been overlooked by other funding sources.
Sure. And how about aid other than just direct grants?
Yeah, so about 70% of the Working Lands Enterprise Fund each year goes directly to businesses for these projects that we mentioned that are usually around infrastructure or equipment as well as marketing. But another key focus for the Working Lands Enterprise Board is grants to service provider organizations. So these are, for example, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and their Farm and Forest Viability Program is a program that provides pretty comprehensive business advising services to farm and forest businesses. And we also provide grants to producer associations. So these are trade associations of different sectors, whether that's dairy, logging, or vegetable and berry growers in Vermont. They need funds to sort of strengthen their networks and provide services. So these are funds that we provide to these sort of broader groups that are serving businesses in other ways.
Great. And Elizabeth, we're almost out of time, but before we close, you mentioned that it was founded in 2012 and a lot has changed since then. So how have you seen this program change as well?
Yeah, I think there have been some very significant changes. So every year the board meets, we meet monthly, but then every year the board meets for an annual planning process, and that is where the board is looking across the landscape to identify critical areas of need. And I think one of those areas of need has been investment in supply chain infrastructure. So several years ago, the board created a brand new funding opportunity focused on supply chain infrastructure. So these are projects that are providing services to, many working lands businesses. So the board now makes, when funds are available, catalytic investments to individual businesses, but is also very committed to making investments in supply chain infrastructure like distribution services, storage facilities.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I hate to cut you off, but thank you both for joining us so much. And if you would like to learn more about the Working Landscape Enterprise Initiative or apply for a grant, you can contact the website on your screen. And that's our show for today. I want to thank the hardworking crew behind the scenes here at WCAX. I'm Jolie Whitney. This is Across the Fence. Have a good one.